do our song to open up in just a minute, but we were talking a little bit about what's coming up this week. You look at, I was talking to my wife, you look at all the stuff that you have going on in your life, you know, and everybody has stuff, right? You know, things that didn't work out the way you wanted, so on and so forth. And there's a new thought pioneer, it's all by the name of Christian Larson. One of the things I learned from reading his stuff is that no matter what it happens, you look to find the good in it. Mm-hmm. I don't know what good people that live up there are going to find. For some, it'll be a new home. It's just, you know, it's kind of beyond description right now. But I want you to keep in mind today, because today we're going to talk about Thanksgiving. We're going to talk about forgiveness. Keep in mind that somehow this is still God expressing. That's right. You know, and if it's God expressing, there's good to be found within that. Maybe not for us, maybe for the people that are there. I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I can't explain it, but I do believe it, and I want to share that with you as we open up today. So let me get my guitar and we'll play a little music. We'll do our opening prayer. This doesn't need to be about our greatness in here because we come together today to celebrate God in this space, and therefore we only bring our greatness and our good. So as we open up this morning, let's pause and reflect on the idea that there's one life, and that life is God's life. That life is perfect, and that life is our life now. It is the life that expresses through us, as us. It's the life that expresses all that surrounds us. It is the life that creates all that is, and is the source of all that will be. And as we open our minds and our hearts to an awareness of the truth of that, we realize that we are God expressed as us, and therefore we are blessed in our own life right where we are. There's nothing more that needs to be added because all the goodness is here. Our spiritual journey, as we participate in this today, is a journey of discovery. Discovery of the truth of ourselves, discovery of God within us, and taking that discovery and watching it demonstrate in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment life experience that we call ours. And I'm thankful and grateful for that. I'm thankful for being here, for the people that are here, for this wonderful philosophy that we put into practice in our lives, and just for today, because today is an absolutely great and wonderful day in all that it is. We release this to God in Thanksgiving, and so it is.
So it is.
Okay, so this week we got Thanksgiving. And we can reflect on a lot to be thankful for in our lives, as I said a little bit ago. But I'm going to start today talking about forgiveness. And although we covered forgiveness maybe about a month or two ago, now it's been a while. I'm incorporating forgiveness with this concept of Thanksgiving because when you begin to understand how the divine principle that we call God expresses in our lives, and our role in that expression, the discovery of the truth of who we are, forgiveness is a paramount thing in our life. And oftentimes we don't think about it. I mean, we all know, right? We're all supposed to forgive. We forgive because, and people tell us we forgive because it's good for us. We don't need to forgive for the other person, right? But why is it important for us, just besides the fact that it kind of makes us feel good, or maybe kind of squares us with God, if you will, when we seek to forgive? And in the writings that I gave you today, under how God forgives, I think the first line in that says that we are to forgive before God will forgive us. And that's the principle. Why is that so? Why is it important that we understand that forgiveness is so important in our life? And this is a question that I thought about this week as I was preparing for today. And as I was preparing, I was going through and reading some things, listening to some things, and I came across some writings by Judge Thomas Troward, and he made it very clear in a very short period of time, a small paragraph. Now, he didn't put it in these words. These are my words that I'm putting to his ideas. But the reason why it's important that we know forgiveness as part of our day-to-day life experience is because when we fail to forgive, what are we doing? When we fail, when we want to hold to our story someone that has done something to us, right? I mean, we all have part of our story where there's that one person or group of people or part of society. Or you can look at history and it may be a country. I mean, you can go to politics, you can go anywhere, right? Everywhere you look. We all have reasons not to forgive because, and you can fill in the blank. But you see, that's the trap. That's the trap of being a part of and only seeing yourself within the material world. Because the material world is not the world. The material world is only an effect. It's a construct that God, the first cause, however you want to define it, created. But behind this material world is this divine principle that we call God. And we talk about being a unity, and it's important that we understand as we walk our spiritual path, right? As we discover more the truth of who we are, and as we seek to align ourselves with divine principle, to see God's good expressing in our day-to-day life experience, one of the things that we've talked about often is that we need to be in alignment, in harmony with divine principle. And when we fail to forgive, we're looking at another part of God. And we're saying, it's not acceptable, or you're not acceptable. And the minute we do that, it's no different than when we bring judgment into our life. And we're told we're not supposed to judge. And we're not supposed to judge because of exactly the same thing. Every time we fail to forgive, every time we judge somebody, some group, something, we hold ourselves out separate from. We're no longer in our own minds, in our own understanding of who we are. We're no longer part of the greater whole. That doesn't mean that in our forgiveness that we excuse people for bad behavior. That's not the point. But when we look into the world, we look out into the world, and we see in all places, in all spaces, that it's God expressing. What part of God are we not going to say, I'm not going to align with? What part of God are we going to say, that's not good enough for me? And you see, we can't do that. We can't do that because we are God expressed as ourselves. And God cannot, as a wholeness, as an infiniteness, cannot have a part of it that's in opposition to any other part. Okay, not only does it not make sense on a logical basis, but it doesn't make sense on a spiritual basis either. Our understanding of God, one of the words that we use, the primary word that is used oftentimes to describe God is this word called love. Where is it within love that we hold a place for non-forgiveness? Where is it within love that we choose to be judgmental of some other part? And you see, that can be difficult for us because we get caught up in the material part of our life. We look at life and we think this is the what is. That, you know, the streets and the job and all this stuff, this is the what is. And that's how we get lost. That's how the history of humanity has been kind of like the story in the Bible of the Hebrews running through the desert for 40-some years trying to find where they're supposed to be. And that's kind of our story also. Trying to find where we're supposed to be in our life. So when we begin to walk our spiritual path and people say, okay, one of the things we got to do is we got to get in alignment with principle, with God, with spirit. We've got to forgive those, and we all have our own, you know, it could be individuals, it could be a circumstance. But see, here's the thing. Individuals, circumstances, conditions, effects, those are all secondary. They're not first cause. They're not God. They're a result of something that created something, that created something, that created something, that ended up in effect or whatever. And so because the distance is there in the various things that happen, oftentimes we lose sight of the fact that this end result, no matter how strange or we can call it evil, if you will, it's still part of God expressing. That we have to go back to first cause, always. And there is no time where we don't. When we begin to understand that for ourselves, we begin to understand our true place, the truth of who we are, in this thing that we call life. There is but one life. This life is God. This life is perfect, and this life is expressing as each and every one. It's our life right now. And it's good. And it's always good. Our understanding of that good sometimes may be a little difficult to get to as we walk our spiritual path. But you know, as we continue to walk the path, as we continue to go on in our day-to-day life experience, we find there's more and more good to be had, to be experienced. There's more God to be expressed in our lives. We find things that oftentimes we think are coincidental, that seem to be working in our favor. And all of a sudden, like-minded people show up in our life. Maybe we come across a new thought book that we've never heard of before. And then who knows? Next thing you know, we end up in a New Thought Center talking about this thing called life. God expressing as us, through us, and how empowering it is when we begin to embrace that as the truth of who we are and to begin to make it part of our life expression. So forgiveness is very, very important. And the thing is, in order to get to a point of thanksgiving, true thanksgiving, we have to work through forgiveness first. We have to let go. We can't truly be thankful if we still are holding something up, right? You can't be. How can I be thankful? And when I say thankful, I'm talking about thankful in the kind of the global universal idea to begin with. Thankful with life. When you woke up this morning, today was a day, it was a gift from God to you specifically. God gifted you this day and basically said, go forth, my child, and experience and express all that you can in life because I have granted you, given you, created for you this life to express in. And our gift back to God is in that thanksgiving and in going forth and in living our life maximally as good as we can. Wow, what a concept. I didn't get this early on when I was going to Sunday school. I don't know about you, but people didn't tell me that I lived my life for God. You know, people told me that I lived my life and God was watching to make sure that I was a good boy. Okay? And if I wasn't a good boy, well, you know, the old saying is there was hell to pay. And I guess they were talking about it literally. I don't know. But the thing is, if God is infinite, where does God not exist? In the beginning there was God, and God created. And you see, in that part of the Bible in Genesis, it ends up with God looks at his creation, and it was good. How can God look at her creation and say it's good if it contains something that's not part of it, something that works in opposition to it? It can't. The teachings of Jesus, as we've been studying these last couple of weeks, give us, as Judge Troward says, Jesus shows us, the master teacher shows us a process that we can put these spiritual principles into practice in our life. And we went through a lot of them last week. We talked about the teachings of the various parables and how they reflect even to today. And how that when Jesus took his disciples aside and he didn't just share with them the parables, but he actually elaborated on what they meant. They got a more detailed teaching, if you will. And they went forth and they did what? They did the miracles. They raised the dead. They healed the sick. But you know what? It didn't stop with them. This actually continued on for a rather extensive period of time after the death of the master teacher. But at some point in time, the church that existed at that time said, well, you know, that really is only his stuff. And if you're doing it, you shouldn't be. And therefore, it kind of went away. But you know, history is replete with individuals that discovered the truth of who they were, and they continued to do it. At the top of what I handed out today, there was a quote from Meister Eckhart. And it says essentially that if the only prayer you pray is thank you, that will suffice. If the only prayer you pray is thank you, that will suffice. And we can think about all the stuff that we deal with in our life, but he was dead on with that. If you wake every morning and you start with thank you, if you keep that Thanksgiving consciousness within your consciousness all day long and close the day, the evening with thank you. If you just did that, your life would change dramatically. And I know that. And I know that most of us, if not all of us, have all our other stuff that we incorporate in our day-to-day, moment-to-moment life experience. But we're here. We're here to learn about a philosophy, a faith, and a way of life, a way of living, that when we have faith in this philosophy and we apply it in our life, we can demonstrate a greater good, because that was the promise. You see, there was a promise when you were created, when we were all created. The promise was that what you need, what you want, what you desire, in order to express life maximally, is available to you. That was a promise. It was a promise that came with the understanding that once you begin to learn the truth of who you are, that you realize that there's a potential of all those things. All those things. What is it you want in your life today that you're not experiencing? If you want it, if it takes from no other person, if it helps you to express your life at a greater, higher possibility, potentiality, then chances are that desire isn't something that just happened. That desire exists within you just like the life principle itself exists within you. That desire is there to, very simplistically, kind of like a carrot at the end of the stick, to get you to move forward, to move towards it, to find a way to get to it, to find a way to experience it, to find a way to have it as part of your life experience. Because, you see, the thing is, God created us to express God through us. But the deal is, our gift back to God is that we do it to the best of our ability, maximum. Now you'd say, okay, if that's the case, then why didn't God tell us and give us an instruction sheet, or give us everything we need, want, and desire in the beginning so that we can just go out and live life? But the truth is, it's not the way life works. We express life maximally when we strive for things, when we see something that we want and we go for it. I don't know about you, but when I grew up, I can remember my folks saying, if you get something easy, you don't appreciate it. If it just comes to you, you don't have the same appreciation for it that you would if you worked for it. Mm-hmm. That type of idea has been in human history for a long time. The idea that, what you put your own, shall we say, blood, sweat, and tears into, that when you finally do acquire, transcend, move beyond, overcome, whatever it is, that when you get to the other side, there's a feeling that no one can give to you by talking to you, a feeling that you cannot get in reading a book. It's a feeling you only get when you achieve, when you accomplish, when you transcend, when you overcome. And there's a reason why that feeling is there. There's a reason why once that you've done that, the desire is there to do it again and again. Because that's when we are at our best at giving back to that which we call God, that created life for us. When we give back by living our life, striving, overcoming, getting to the other side, achieving, winning, if you will, okay? There's something that happens within us that we can't get from any other way. And at that moment, you can almost say that experience that we're experiencing is God smiling within us for the good that we've given back to God. You say, well, how can we give back good to God that is infinite, that has everything? You see, the thing is, God is infinite consciousness. God's not a guy or a girl or a place or a being. And God created creation. Consciousness created creation. So we have something to be conscious of. And in that process, as we've evolved, all of creation has evolved. And we get to the point where one day humanity woke up and said, hey, I am. Okay? Holmes tells us that from that point on, we were no longer subject to the evolutionary process of all these outside forces, because we realized that we could dodge boulders. We could move away from volcanoes. We didn't have to let the tribe down the street come into our cave to come and take our stuff. because we had a mind, we had consciousness, and we could put it to work for us. And slowly but surely we developed language, and at some point someone figured out that there's more to this than what we know. And we begin to understand that there's something that we call the divine, or God, or gods. And humanity spent years trying to figure out what that was. But you know, when you look back, if you've taken time to study it, there's kind of a single thread that runs through it, of spirituality. It's not a single thread of religion. It's not a single thread of an idea particularly. It's a single thread of spirituality. Understanding that we have a spiritual place in this universe as conscious beings. And then the discovery over a period of time. And then at some point in time, Jesus shows up and he begins to teach. And like I said, he was a radical rabbi. He taught things that were antithetical to what, they were teaching at the time. He made a lot of enemies, but he taught. When he was crucified, the movement at that time was to make him a martyr, a sacrifice, because sacrifice at that time was the way that we appeased gods or God. It was through sacrifice. And people that believed in him as the Messiah at that time couldn't reconcile the Messiah, who was the king, was the overcomer, being hung on a cross where we put criminals. And so someone figured out, well, maybe it was because he was here to give his life for us. Because you can look at his teachings and you say, kind of makes sense, right? And there was a whole group of religions that grew up around that. But even as that was transpiring, in the background, there was still this spirituality, this understanding that God was not the God that had been explained in the Old Testament as a judgmental, vengeful God that was going to see to it that if you didn't toe the mark to the very last cubit, that you were exiled forever. Jesus taught about a God that was love. Just very simple. Love. That's not a love necessarily that we understand in its totality, but we begin to get it in pieces, however it is that it relates to us. This thing called love, this thing called God, this thing called life. There's one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. And that life is ours. And when we understand, one life, God's life, we get to this perfect part. We look around and we say, well, I don't see so much perfect here. We talk about being created in the image and the likeness of the divine, of God, and yet I'm not seeing so much perfection here. But the perfection exists. It exists for each and every one of us. One of the things that Jesus taught us, it's done unto us as we believe. Okay? And we've talked about this concept of belief. This is a very important thing. It's not about what I say that I believe. I can believe that God is infinite in my consciousness. But if I really believe that God is infinite, how can I hold something against my neighbor? How can I do that? How can I reconcile within me as an expression of God, if that's my belief, and look to someone else and say, you don't measure up, or you've done something, and I stand in judgment, and I refuse to forgive them, and I hold it in my life as part of my story. We see a lot of that today, don't we? We see a lot of people holding to their stories, and we look out into the evening news, and it's everywhere. You see it in the newspapers. You see it in the communities. Mm-hmm. It's our turn now. It's our turn, the people that are in this room. It's our turn to look out into the world and see the world as God expressing, and in doing so, do it from a point of understanding that it's all love. That we do recognize that maybe if there's things in our story where we have been reluctant to let go and to not forgive, that maybe it's time to forgive and let it go, because it's not about them. It's not about whatever. It's about me, and it's about me and my relationship to my divine principle, which I call God, which exists at the core of my being, which expresses through me as life that says to me, You are my son, in whom I am well pleased, or my daughter. God says that to each and every one of us. When we start our day, when you open up your eyes, and you're still here, so to speak. There's a lot of people that didn't wake up this morning for various reasons. But we did. We were gifted another day to experience more God in our life, another day to experience more goodness in our life, another day to be the expression of all that we can be on our spiritual path. And how wonderful it is when we begin to realize that truth of who we are. How wonderful that is. We understand that no matter what comes our way, and life brings us a lot of stuff. Life comes at us at the speed of life for sure. But you know what? No matter how fast, how hard life comes at us, we have a bigger God. And one of the things that we were taught through the master teacher is that with God, all things are possible. Think about that. All things are possible. It's like that other thing that we talk about quite often, that we're to love God with all we are. We love our neighbors, as we love ourselves. And in both of those things, there's no little asterisk with a footnote at the bottom of the page that says, except for.
Right.
With God, all things are possible. The master teacher, he walked the face of the earth to be the example, not the exception. And he taught. So we can take our time and put these principles into practice in our life. But we have to lay the foundation, if you will, to make the land, the soil within our hearts and our minds fertile for God's goodness to take root and to grow and to blossom within us. And we do that as we begin our process of forgiving, as we make sure that we're not holding someone else in judgment. And knowing that as we do that, as we take time each day, Joel Goldsmith talks about practicing the presence of God. That's where it begins. It begins when we forgive. It begins when we don't judge. And it begins when we open our hearts and our minds to a place of acceptance, of understanding that there was a divine promise that was made to each of us. A divine promise. Now, do we all live up to the level of that promise? Probably not. But oh, what a great journey it is as we begin to move forward. We've talked about in the past that it's necessary for us in our spiritual journey to experience this thing that we call God somehow in our life as our life unfolds, whether it be through prayer treatment and seeing demonstration, whether it be through a moment of meditation and prayer when all of a sudden there's an enlightenment that comes upon us, or sometimes we see it in a miracle of something with our family, or our children, or our parents. And we realize that that something is extraordinary. That it really is God doing what God does. And as we do that, as we recognize that, it changes something within us. That we no longer at that point look at spirituality, look at God from an intellectual point of view. All of a sudden, this idea of relationship becomes extremely personal. That my relationship with the divine, I can know. And I can know that I know. And I know I can talk about it. I know that that light can shine within me. I can share that with you. And I know that for each and every one of us here and those beyond, that knowingness is available when we take the time to seek it out. So we're told, with all things get understanding. We're told that when we know the truth will set us free. We're told that I and my Father are one. We're told that all that I have done, you can do and that much more. And we're told that with God, all things are possible. And this is part of what this person taught. And he didn't teach it for that period of time. He taught it for all time and all humanity. And so here today, we know that we can put it into practice in our life. We know that we can experience good. We know that we have a refuge that we can go to in times where we're feeling a little bit alone. But each time we seek that refuge out for us, it becomes stronger, more powerful. And pretty soon we can stand in our own light and we can say, I am divinely guarded and guided throughout the day. No matter what happens, I'm good to go. There's nothing that can overcome me. I've got a bigger God, and with God all things are possible. And I'm an expression of God. The infiniteness lives within each and every one of us. We talk about the infinite being infinite, right? And infinite has no center. But you see, there is a center of God consciousness that exists within each and every one of us. You are the center of the universe. You are the center of the universe that you exist in. Because we're not talking about a material world with material limitations. But we get caught up in that. Our mind gets, limitation. And so oftentimes we see things that happen in life, or we want to do things in life. And we are stuck in that conditions and effect mindset. How often have we sought to get something in our life, whether it be a raise at work, or to have more income, or to have health, or to have a relationship, or a job, or whatever. And what do? We look at all the things that have to take place in order for us to be, do, and have, right? And we think about it. Well, I'm going to have to do this, I'm going to have to do this, and this has got to happen, on and on and on. And that's true if we're looking at it from the outside. But if you understand the divine principle, God is first cause. Not only does God create it, but God creates the path that comes into our life. When we have faith, when we have belief, when we align our belief with divine principle, when we let go of our anchors that bind us to the material world. And so we have forgiveness, we give up judgment, and we have this thing called thanksgiving or gratitude. And in here, constant prayer. Pray without ceasing. This means to be always on the affirmative side of life. Always on the affirmative side of life. To pray without ceasing is to doubt, never, but to always trust in the law of good. You go down here, it says, how we love to do for those who we cooperate with, and are grateful for our small endeavors. Gratitude, last line. Gratitude is one of the chief graces of human existence, and it is crowned in heaven with the consciousness of unity. Ultimately, it's a recognition of the unity, of the oneness, of our relationship with God, with God's relationship with us, and what that means to us. When we embody unity, when we embody that understanding, when we know the truth of who we are, we go to God with all things, knowing that with God all things are possible. And so this week, as we come together, families and friends, and we think about all the things going on in the world, maybe even all the things that have gone on in our life this year. And for some of us, some of those things have been a little tough. But when we come together, and we take this one moment out of one day, out of this year, to recognize Thanksgiving, instead of just making it a singular moment, let's look at that as the seed that we've planted in our consciousness for the next 365 days. That each and every day we recognize in thanksgiving, in gratitude, the good that is available to us, the good that expresses in our life, no matter what the news tells us, no matter what our neighbors tell us, no matter what our friends or so on and so forth, the doctors tell us, we can still see that we can be grateful that we're here, grateful for what God has brought upon the world in love, grateful for each other, grateful for life in general. There is one life. That life is God. That life is perfect. And that is our life now. And for that, I am grateful. And so it is.
So it is. Yes.
Well, I hope you found that enlightening today, or inspirational. You know, it's amazing how things that in my journey, things that I just, you look at and you think, yeah, that's good, that kind of works, that feels good stuff. But when you really begin to meditate on some of those things, begin to study, begin to see how this puzzle that is the life experience, how these pieces fit together. Not like the way I try to fit. You know, I try to fit. It's like when my kids were little, and we get these puzzles, and the pieces would fit. They want to fit. You know, and we just say, wait, you'll find the right piece. That's our spiritual path. We'll find the right piece. You're not here by accident. You know, you're here for whatever brought you here that you may think brought you here, but ultimately you're here because somewhere within you, that light, that divine principle has stimulated you to the point to where you have a desire to be here, desire to learn more, desire to put this into practice in your life, desire to experience God at a different level than you have, desire to know God, not as something out there somewhere, but as a personalness that exists within you, that is so intimately associated with you that no matter what kind of relationship you may have with anyone else, it will never be the relationship that you have with the God that exists within you. And it's really awesome. And there's no asterisk at the bottom of that page either. There's no exceptions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if there's no exceptions, then what about all that stuff? You know, the stuff that you didn't do, that you should have done, that stuff that maybe you were the person that needs to be forgiven, right? What about that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
You know, don't we have to have some kind of sacrifice for that stuff, right? You know, I mean, what is it? How do we deal with that? And here's how we deal with that. This is the amazing thing, that no matter what we've done, and that doesn't excuse us from the consequences necessarily of our actions if we've hurt other people. That's not the point. But no matter what we've done, the minute that we stop, the second that we stop participating in that mistaking, that sin, that error, whatever you want to call it, the minute we recognize that what we've been doing is not in alignment with principle, and we make that choice to align ourselves with principle, with God, in that instant, God forgives us. Always. Think about it. So no matter how bad you may have thought you were in certain situations in the past, no matter what things you may feel that you need forgiveness for from someone else, when you begin to align yourself with God, one of the first acts of forgiveness is to forgive yourself.
Yeah.
God's already forgiven you, but you've got to forgive yourself. The next thing you do is say thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. You can say it out loud. You can say it within. Just say thank you. And that's when we truly begin to experience Thanksgiving in our life. It's not a day. It's not a meal. It's a mindset. Mm-hmm. It's an alignment with God. It's a connection. It's a feeling. And ultimately, it's the love of God expressing in us, through us, as us. And so it is.
So it is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sin. We gave up our hook.
Yep.
Any way we can find it, put it out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. All right. Listen, thanks for sharing this today. I hope you got some stuff, some things for thought, maybe some tools that you can use, put into practice. You know, as you share with me, everything that comes through here goes essentially back into making sure that we're here, and I appreciate it. I have some goals for next year. I want to get a new webpage up and all these various things, and it's going to take some of our abundance, some of our goodness to get it done. Put some aside for it. I know we'll have more, and I thank you for that. Because truly, you're all part of our home, whether you're here once in a while or whether you're here every week. You know, it's our spiritual home. And I thank you for showing up. I thank you for sharing. And, you know, if there's something in particular that, you know, if you ever have a question about what I've talked about during the day, ask Rudy. He knows. Feel free to ask me. And, you know, if there's something going on in your life and you need or would like to have prayer done for it by a practitioner, talk to me. You know, I can do it. Clark, he's a practitioner. Joanna's a practitioner. Mickey's a practitioner. So, you know, and Tanya's the practitioner, ain't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have people here that can work with you. And it doesn't have to be me, so you don't have to feel like, oh gosh, I gotta go talk to the teacher about it. No, you don't have to do that. Or I can help you do it for yourself. You are incredible beings. And I hope that that's the message you get each and every Sunday when you're here, that you really are incredible beings. You can't be anything less than. So I thank you. I thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that as you've given, God gives back to you. We're going to talk about the law of circulation too. I think I had that at the bottom part of this and didn't get to it today. So it's coming up.
Okay.
All right.
Coming
And
around.
thanks again. So
Thank
it is.
you.
Thank you.
So it is.
Okay. The power of God protects you, and the presence of God, it watches over you too.
Mm-hmm.
Because wherever you are, God is there. And if God's there, no matter what's going on, it's all good. All is well. Thanks. Have a great day. Okay. There's more.